Hello there. Welcome to Book Talk. I'm your host, Anthony Moirore. At Book Talk, as always, we get to have an author come and tell us about his book or her book. And today we have an interesting topic, like we always do. And this topic today is about self-defense. And I'm not going to talk much. I'm just going to bring our author today. He'll tell us a bit more on self-defense. So welcome, Peter Honigmann.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here. And we'll like to know about self-defense. But before we go into that, can we know a bit about you, yourself, your life, and what you do? Yeah.
So my full-time job, I'm actually an attorney, and I've been doing that for about 24 years. I work currently for a legal aid agency, so I get to help people on a regular basis. It's a great job. But my part-time passion, what I've been doing even longer than that, since about 1984, is self-defense, martial arts. And in that time, I've done a bunch of different types of martial arts, but always with the focus of self-defense. That's why I started out, just to be able to have the confidence to defend myself if I ever needed to. And when I started back in 1984, my first instructor, whose name is John McSweeney, he's unfortunately since passed away. He was a very practical guy, and he wanted everything to be simple and straightforward. And I liked that approach, and I've stuck with that all these years. And so about 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to start teaching. So I've become more active in teaching, and you can see this is my basement where I do my teaching. Small studio, but I can usually get 4 or 5 people down here, mostly adults and seniors. And then a couple years ago, I remembered that he had a book called Street Karate. So here's this book here, Street Karate, a complete course in self-defense. And on the cover are 2 of his senior students who now have their own schools. And I've actually studied under both of them. And this book gives 35 scenarios where real people actually used martial arts or self-defense in real situations. But it's out of print. But it's a great book, and I haven't been able to find any other books like it. So when I found it was out of print, I thought, this would be really a great book to bring back and to share with people. So John had passed away. I contacted the publisher. They actually went out of business, and they said, hey, we've given the rights back to his wife. So I contacted her, and I said, I used to be one of John's students. I would like to buy this book and get it republished. And she was very nice about it and sold me the rights to the book. So I have the book, and what I've been doing is I had a lot of different ideas on what to do with it. But then finally what I did was I took the book in basically its original format. I didn't have any other materials other than the book itself, because it was so long ago when it was published. And I have a group of guys who are very good at photography. They took pictures of it, imaged it really nicely, and I'm reworking the cover, and I'm changing some of the content to add some of my own thoughts. So John had what happened in the situation, and he explained what they did. I've added legal thoughts about the legal consequences of what people have done in these situations, what maybe they shouldn't have done or what they could do, and then my own thoughts about other things people could do in that situation to protect themselves, different types of techniques that I think might work better for some people. So that's kind of where I'm at. It should be actually coming out very soon, available on my website in a couple of weeks.
Ah, that's beautiful. And now, since we know that you've done a karate book because you are a trainer, please, can we know, why should we as a general public know about self-defense, and in this case, karate?
Yeah. And it's called street karate, which is interesting because, karate is a Japanese word, which means empty hand. Okay. And so it's not, so Kempo karate, which is what I studied when I started out, is kind of a mix of different arts, especially the way John taught it. It was a mix of like judo. I don't know if you're familiar with martial arts yourself, but judo, karate, some Chinese kung fu. So those kind of all mixed in there. So street karate is just, I think you like the name, even though it's not specifically just like Japanese karate. But self-defense itself is important these days, as just because there are so many things going on in the world that are not good, right? We, unfortunately, in the United States, you're probably aware, we have a lot of active shooter scenarios that occur every year. That number has been rising just to the number of firearms we have here. So those, and not necessarily this is going to apply there, but we do have, I live near Chicago, and unfortunately, Chicago has an extremely high number of carjackings that occur on a regular basis.
Okay.
That's a situation where, having some self-defense skills might make sense. So what I teach people, the main things we talk about is situational awareness. I need to know what's going on around me, being able to de-escalate a situation, not make it worse, and maybe talk your way out of it. Sometimes that helps. But when those things don't work, having some sort of physical skills to be able to defend yourself. And this book is one of the few that offers both situations or scenarios where things were actually done and explains how you would get out of those situations. And I've looked, and there are a lot of books out there. I mean, there are tons of books on martial arts and self-defense. Very few are good at explaining things, and so you can understand. And there are also, as far as I'm aware, not very many that have had any real life components to them, or that it's a small part of the whole book.
Now, beautiful where you have touched a bit about the definition of karate. We call it karate, you call it karate. I mean, it's an issue of the pronunciation. I come from Kenya. Right now,
Okay.
I'm in Athens, Greece myself. Now, it happens that where I am, there's not much that I need to defend myself against. But when I go back to my country, I am aware that anytime I could meet with a situation where I need to have some little skill. So,
okay.
so this book maybe could be useful. And now I want to know a bit more, a little more understanding on the differences of karate, judo, taekwondo, if you don't mind.
Sure.
For me to
No
get
problem.
exactly what is this, I mean, and if there is another one that is close to it, something that maybe after learning karate, maybe got to another thing.
So, so you've got martial arts, which, kind of describe things that come from, every culture seems to have their own art or form of self-defense, and some are more ancient than others. You've got karate, which came from Japan, so they've got Japanese origins. Judo is also Japanese, but judo is more about throws. All right, so judo, which actually means the art of the gentle way, which is throwing people. Nothing gentle about it when you hit the ground, but that's really what it's about. It's not about striking, it's not about kicking, it's about getting people, learning to take them off balance and to throw them. Then there's Aikido, which is another, I don't know if you know Steven Seagal, big action movie star. That is also more about being able to manipulate people's joints, locking up wrists and arms. Again, that's more about throws than it is about striking. Taekwondo, which is from Korea, is more focused on kicks. They do a lot of kicks. They do a little bit of punching, but mostly their focus is high kicks, fancy kicks. They do every type of kick there is. So in the United States, we have Taekwondo studios, dojos, everywhere. They're like, just anywhere you go, you can almost always find a Taekwondo school. So they're very popular, especially for children, because they're great for teaching basic skills, balance, discipline. So a lot of good stuff there. When you're looking at self-defense these days, so John McSweeney, my original instructor, even though he called it Kempo Karate, and his original instructor's name was Ed Parker. He came from Hawaii. He was very well known in the United States for teaching his version of Kempo. He taught Elvis. He taught a lot of famous people. He was really big in Hollywood. So John studied with him, got his black belt. And when he created his own version of self-defense, he's like, I need to make it simple. So he simplified it, added some things that he liked, because John was in the military and he was in Japan and studied judo. So he kind of had this mix of things. So it's more reality based. He didn't like sport karate. It wasn't about points and, winning tournaments and stuff. He's like, I'm teaching you to survive on the street. Today, there are more reality-based types of self-defense systems. I don't know, have you heard of Krav Maga?
I haven't.
So Krav Maga was designed by the Israelis. It's an Israeli form of self-defense. It's not an art because it's not, they borrowed from everybody else. They said, oh, we like this. This is from karate, or this is from taekwondo, or wherever it's from. And they put it together and said, we like this because it's effective self-defense.
Okay.
So they're not so much an art as they are a self-defense system. So the art tends to be more about, you take something from some country, like for China, for example, they've got Kung Fu, and it's got a mix of forms or things you do on your own, a set of moves. You will learn various strikes and things like that. And it's got a lot of history behind it. Krav Maga is really just about, hey, how am I going to hurt somebody if they're trying to hurt me? Right. So it's more reality based. So that's kind of just a quick and dirty, a few of the martial arts that are out there, because there are quite a few. Oh. It's all in what you want as a student.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, there's something I want to know, because we are talking about your book now, Street Karate. I want to know, if I'm going to get into it, maybe you tell us a bit more of what is inside there. But if I take the book, could I learn some skills that I can just practice on my own?
Yes. So the good thing about it is that it gives you each chapter, and it's relatively short, so each chapter talks about the situation that someone was in, the attack that occurred, and then the defensive skills the person used. And it does describe and also provide some pictures to explain, how you would do the technique, what's important about when you're defending yourself, and how you use, the weapons, which are your body, basically. So this book is not focused on, using weapons or, other than your hands or your feet or your elbows and that kind of thing. So it is pretty straightforward, and it does give you kind of the outline of what you would need to do. Now, of course, learning anything solely from a book is difficult. You read something, you're like, if you haven't done anything before, any martial arts, and you read it, it might not make sense to you. But in this day and age, with all the videos that are out there, you can usually find something that might also help you along with this book. But the book is I think, a foundation, and shows you that the things that he taught were effective.
And I agree with you on that note, because I learned my driving through reading a book before I went to a school.
Really?
But when I entered in the car, I came to discover it's quite something different. But the good thing is that we were not the same with someone who would never known what's an accelerator, what is a clutch, what is a brake. We were quite different.
Okay.
So it was easier for me to get moving before the others could catch up with
it.
Yeah. So I agree with you. It's important to know, even though we are not having a plan to start on the lessons, it's good to know, so that when we come to that point, we can always be a class ahead of the others.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for the book that you are. Have you released it? Have you released it yet? Is it?
No. So I'm finalizing it. We were working on. So I've got the content that took me a little while to try and come up with. I was trying to figure out a good way. So originally I had thought about actually kind of redoing the book, taking the information that he had, reshooting photos, and kind of redoing it from the start. And then I realized that was a lot of work. And I decided that maybe if I just took his original content and modified it. So that took a little while just to figure out how I wanted to annotate it with my own thoughts and ideas. So now we're just kind of finalizing, that part's done. We're just finalizing covers, the cover shoot. So I'm changing the cover a little bit.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned a bit about that before. So when is it expected to be in the market?
I believe we're very close to having it done. It's going to be, just digital content. So I think it'll be about 2 weeks. It should be available.
Yeah, that's good. So we'll keep an eye on that. And I would ask all the viewers, those who get to view and those who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, to follow Peter Honigmann. Sorry.
Honigmann, yes, Honigmann, you're good.
It's a bit difficult. So what is your website, if I may ask at this point? So
it's the name of my company, if you will. So my company name is Best Defense Concepts. So it's just bestdefenseconcepts.com. So it's pretty easy. I don't have a school per se, because I don't rent space. Like I said, I just kind of use my basement. So, I don't call myself a school, because I'm really not.
Okay.
But that's my website. It does have, fair bit of information about myself. I do have videos from other classes and seminars that I've taught. So there's some information there as well. Those are all on kind of like on YouTube. Do post a fair bit on Facebook as well, and share information about recent situations where things went wrong, things went right, or just kind of tips for people.
Now, it's good that we know that it's not only the picture that we are going to see in the book, that you have videos on YouTube so that we see the action. I was trying to imagine that if I see the picture in the book, how am I going to know where you moved from here?
Yeah, I can only do so much. You'd have to take so many photos to sometimes explain one thing. And I found that when I try to explain in words something that I can do very easily, for example, one of the simplest strikes that I teach somebody is using the base of the palm to strike the nose of the face, right? So this is a very simple thing to teach people. Mm-hmm. However, when you're trying to describe it in words, it becomes far more complicated. You have to use a lot of words to describe something that's very simple.
Yeah. And then you use a picture which says, which we say a picture has got 1,000 words, but still
there's something missing. Yeah, it's not.
There's something missing. So now it's good that we see it in practice. And then do you travel around? I mean, like if you have a group that wants some lessons, do you travel around quite a lot?
So I do travel around. Right now, it's been, so kind of like yourself with as we were talking earlier, COVID has, impacted all of us, around the world. So I haven't been traveling nearly as much as I used to. But before COVID, I was doing a fair amount of traveling, mostly throughout Illinois, northern part of the state. But I have been up to Wisconsin, and I'm willing to travel other places if people are interested in inviting me. But, it's most of it is and in addition to the paid work that I do, I also belong to a group called freespeakers.org. So libraries, for example, they might need someone to come and speak, and they can't afford to really pay a lot of money. So I'm willing to go out to libraries and talk to people about self-defense. That's another way that I kind of reach out to people, just kind of go into different communities. I'm very happy to share, my information. And every group I meet is always, fascinating. They have lots of questions. They tell me exciting stories sometimes that, for example, I'll share one with you. So I was at a presentation at a library several years ago, and afterwards a nice lady came up and said, I really appreciate everything you told me. I want to tell you a situation that occurred with my husband and I. So they were in Arizona, they said, several years ago, and I think she was probably in her 60s at the time they were there. They were walking around, and a guy came up and stuck a gun in their face and said, "Your money or your life?" And she said her and her husband looked at each other and then looked at him, and they said to the robber, they said, "You're going to have to shoot us." And I was surprised. I'm like, I would never tell people to say things like that. Apparently the robber was also surprised. So he repeated his threat, and he said, "Your money or your life." And they said, "You're going to have to shoot us." And then the woman told me that at that point, her husband did something to knock the gun out of his hand, and he ran away. So at this point, they go to the police office and they report the robbery, attempted robbery. And he's like, "So where are you people from?" And they said, "Well, we're from South Chicago." And he said, "Well, that makes sense, because South side of Chicago is a pretty kind of tough area." So he was surprised, because who else would do something so crazy as to say things like that to an armed robber? So I get some fascinating stories from people.
Stories are many. I could be having a story of myself. Just 2 years ago, I went back home to Kenya, and I had to wake up early in the morning, me and my wife, and we have to go somewhere at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then we were attacked. Not really. Some people are coming at us. And what helped us is that we had some running skills.
Okay.
And we ran and we jumped over a fence. And that's when I knew I had a hidden talent of jumping.
Well,
but now that I meet some experience like that, I could think of some self-defense lessons.
So,
Okay,
hey,
anyway, and it's
yeah.
good that you, on that question I asked you about going to places and you've done videos. I also think that you could sign up people that you teach online. I mean, like we are talking now, you would
Mhm,
observe what they are doing. You tell them now you've done it right, wrong, correct
mhm.
here. Do you do that?
I haven't, but like you said, it's certainly people do that. There's a lot of the online schools that do have online school teaching instruction. So I certainly could, if people wanted to, I could do that. The
Mhm.
part that misses that I can't do in person, even though I can kind of do, like you said, I can say, well, that doesn't look right. You need to correct this and that,
Mhm.
um, which is a good part of teaching. But the other part is it's actually striking. And so, with pads and stuff, and as you can see from behind me, I've got all these pads and things. So, when people are practicing, one of the things we want to practice is actually hitting things, because
Yeah.
you need to have some feeling of what it's like to impact a target, because punching in the air is just not the same. It's like reading a book about driving, and then you get in, you're like, wow, driving is very different than what I read.
Mhm.
Punching in the air is very different than when all of a sudden you get into a fight and now you got to hit something. It's very different things. So people need to, and most people aren't familiar with hitting or impact and how it feels. So that part's missing. So while you can do it through video, and it's not my preference, I certainly am available to do so.
Okay, that's good to know. And we are going to share your website, the one that you told us, in the show notes,
Thank you.
whatever that we are going to share the video. But at this point, I want to thank those people who've been watching us live. We have some people, we have Damianos Dani, we have John Kafue, we have Nelly Wamogai, who is watching us live, and some others that may not be identified here. And we have a comment from one John Kafue Nyaga, who is saying, I quite agree that the book gives the theory of a subject before the practical part, which is very important. The subject of self-defense has become a requirement. Thank you very much, John. Yeah, and we also want to thank each and every person that is going to listen to this podcast once we are through. And remember to share it with others. And at this point, I would like to inform those who have been watching us and don't have the time to always watch. You can always listen. Now we are on all the podcasts platforms that you can think of. Go to Stitcher, go to Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. You can find this program and other programs that we've done before and the ones that we are going to do in future. So thank you very much, Peter. We are very honored to have you and talk to us about karate, street karate, a complete course in self-defense. And
Well, thank you, Anthony. I appreciate the time. I'm glad you gave me a few moments to share the information with everybody. So I do wish everybody safety and good health.
yeah, and before you go, you can leave us with words that we can always remember. Words that we can always remember. Please do.
So, for me, what I tell people is the most important thing about self-defense is really it's paying attention to what's going on around you, right?
Mhm.
Because that's really what's going to allow you to either escape or be prepared to defend yourself. If you're so busy focused on your phone or lost in your own thoughts that you don't see a threat ahead, which could be an open hole, in the street or something else, it's not an attack. But to protect yourself from everything that's going on, you need to be aware. And if you're doing that, just like yourself, when you ran away from trouble because you saw it, then you're probably going to avoid most issues and you don't have to get into any fights. So that's what I tell people. I'm like, if you do that 90% of the time, you're going to be fine.
And thank you very much for advocating for escaping.
Absolutely.
There comes a time that when you just can't do nothing, you've got to assess the situation and know whether to fight, to just
All
give
right.
up,
Yeah. Yeah.
or run away.
Yeah. It's very true.
So once again, we really thank you very much for being on our show this day. And we wish you success in whatever that you're doing. And we wish more people would learn the practice of karate, the street karate that you have given in that book.
Well, I appreciate that. And yes, I agree. I always tell people whatever you do, learn something. I don't care what you learn, as long as you can learn something to protect yourself, you're going to do yourself a big favor. So thank you again.
Wonderful. And have a good time.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, bye.